Basically, Life and Time survey is an attitudinal survey looking at the attitudes and experiences and opinions of the public in Northern Ireland. The survey, it's an annual survey and it began in 1998. We're looking at attitudes, but we're also looking at the behaviour in a small part as well of a wide range of people across Northern Ireland. And we interview about 1,200 adults right across Northern Ireland. It's a representative sample, so we feel it does give a good reflection of how the public in Northern Ireland feel. So it's important to look at attitudes now, but because it's an annual survey, we also have been tracking how attitudes have changed, or perhaps how they haven't changed since the survey began in 1998. But of course, before that, we had the Northern Ireland Social Attitude Survey, which some of you might remember, which ran from 1989 to 1996. And in fact, some of the questions that were asked within that survey are also asked within the Life and Time survey. So we have got attitudes stretching back for at least the last 20 years or more on some of our key areas in Northern Ireland, in particular in relation to community relations and political attitudes. Now, the survey is made up of about 4 or 5 modules each year, i.e. each module has a particular topic, and we choose the topics to reflect the current issues of the day. So some of these are repeated every year, some of these are repeated every so often, just so that we can see how things are changing. So just to look at the 2010 survey, which we're launching today, 1,205 adults aged 18 or over were interviewed in their own homes right across Northern Ireland, and the fieldwork took place between October and December last year. The modules and topics that we looked at were community relations, questions on political attitudes, which especially focused on how people feel about the Assembly and the kind of workings of the Assembly and the Dahont system and how that's used. We have informal carers, which we're looking at today. And in fact, this is a module of questions that was mostly asked in 2006. And we also asked that within the 1994 Northern Ireland Social Attitude Survey as well. So we have a long length of time series data on carers in Northern Ireland. We've got questions on minority ethnic people and migrant workers. We also have a series of questions looking at people's understanding and attitudes of dementia, and that's something that we're going to be looking at in the next few months. And then looking at social care for older people. So I think you will see that this is the range of topics that we've got within the 2010 survey really reflect the issues that are coming up that are affecting us all in our everyday lives, and also importantly are going to be things that are discussed within the Assembly and the Executive within the next few months as these things become higher up the social and political agenda, we hope. Anyway, and hopefully this is part of the rationale of the Life and Time survey, which is to give people's voice and feed that into the public policy, social policy and political debates of the day. So we ran the survey between October and December last year. I've been doing a lot of work in the background, and today what we have is the data and the results of the website, the results of the survey available on our website. So from the website from now, you can find all the questionnaires to see exactly how we ask the questions. You can find the technical reports, but you can find tables of results for each of the questions. There's about 500-600 questions asked within the Life and Time survey, and on the website you can find out frequency tables for each question and also results broken down by age, sex and religion. And if you want to do some secondary analysis of the data set yourself, you can download the data, which is available in SPSS format. And if all else fails, you can phone me up and ask me a question. So all that is available on the website today. Of course, we also have a wide range of publications, and today we're very happy to launch 3 of those, all of which are related to carers and then formal caring today. The first of these is written by Helen, which is looking at caring in Northern Ireland today, and that's looking at attitudes and experience of adult carers using data from the Northern Ireland Life and Time survey. Also using that, we have a fact sheet that is looking at men and carers within our society today. And today is also, this week, as well as being Carers Week, is also Men's Health Week. So the Men and Carers report was produced in order to inform Men's Health Week as well. And in fact, we found that 40% of carers were actually male, so we felt that it was important that this fact sheet was developed as well. And we also have another research update called Young Carers 2, written with by myself and Katrina, which looks at the life of young carers within Northern Ireland using data from the Young Life and Time survey. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that now. In a short while. So I'd just like to do the thank yous. It's not quite an Oscar acceptance speech, but I'd like to say thank you to our funders, of course, without whom we wouldn't have the survey. So in particular to the Office of the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister, to Atlantic Philanthropies, who funded this module on informal care, and to the Economic and Social Research Council, who are core founders of ARC. Of course, we wouldn't have a survey if we didn't have our respondents, and we'd really like to thank our 1,205 respondents who are totally anonymous. Perhaps some of them are in this room, I don't know. And of course, we'd also like to thank Carers Northern Ireland, and to Helen and to Laura in particular, and also Rosemary, who was doing some media interviews as well this morning, for all their work. And it's been really good working for you, and hopefully with that kind of working together, we're able to get our data out there and used in a way that that isn't sitting in a university desk somewhere. So, I say now I'd like to lead on to the substantive part of the seminar, which is looking at the attitudes and experience of carers. And you'd think I was entering a competition to see how many logos I could get on one screen. I think I've got 6, but I just say it's just to reflect that it is Carers Week and it is Men's Health Week. So now I'll hand over to Helen. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Paula. It's very good to be here. Now, I have to say, I feel a little bit of a fraud, especially with one of my former lecturers sitting in the audience, because I left Queen's in 1984 with a 2-2 that I was just about lucky to get, I would say. A whole pile of wonderful experiences, but a fairly average degree. So I feel a bit of a fraud standing up here and talking about research when I'm certainly not qualified to conduct any. But as Paula just said, the important thing about this research is that it is designed to inform and support social policy. And I think particularly in a time of very difficult resource issues, it's all the more important for our public bodies to be confident about where they direct the shrinking pot of resources. And research like this helps informed, intelligent decision making. And we're delighted to be a part of a piece of research that I hope will be very useful. Now, just to start, some more statistics that didn't come from this research. They're UK-wide. 10,000 people a year have a stroke, 36,000 people seriously injured, 27,000 children born with a serious disability or rare syndrome, 220,000 people in the UK diagnosed with cancer, 2,500 diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And that's just the start. Now, I am not saying that every one of those people is going to need or be lucky enough to have the support of a carer. But when someone's life changes because of a disability, because of an accident, because of a long-term condition affecting their lives, it's not just their life affected, but it's the lives of their families, it's the lives of everyone around them. Anyone's life can change in an instant, and the ripples go very far and wide. We estimate from the census information that in Northern Ireland there's about 69,000 people move in and out of caring every year. It's a constantly moving group of people, but it's a very, very, very significant group of people, and they are critical to the support of those of us who are living with disabilities and long-term conditions. So care in the community, the response to the social care needs and support needs of people with disabilities, long-term conditions, chronic illnesses. Does care in the community mean care by the community? Do we still have a network of people within our communities who support those who need help to remain in the community and live independently? Just who is caring in Northern Ireland today? And what's the cost of unpaid care? Now, this research gives us an opportunity to try and find some answers to those last two critical questions. So the Life and Times survey, I'm not going to spend very long talking about because Paul has already given you the background to it. Just to say that the value of it from a policy point of view is that obviously it's up to date. Generally speaking, public policies recently have been based on the 2001 census figures, which obviously are very comprehensive. They included a carer question for the first time and allowed us to get a sense of the prevalence of caring in Northern Ireland in a very accurate way, but they're almost, well, they're 10 years out of date. It's going to be another couple of years before we get a proper analysis of the new census information that's just been gathered. So it gives us good, reliable, up-to-date information, which is very important. It is, as Paula said, a representative sample, so it's safe to draw conclusions for the general population from the people who took part in this survey. It's comparable with both the 2006 Life and Times survey and with the Social Attitudes survey going back to 1996. So it does allow us to track changes, see what's happening, what movements there are, whether some of the things we thought might develop in terms of social care and caring are in fact coming to pass, or whether they're not. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. And it also contains some additional information to add to our understanding. There's, as Paula said, most of it is comparable, but there are a couple of additional questions that were asked that I think will be very particularly useful for us to look at. So to go into what came out of it, you have it in your packs. You don't have the full survey in your packs, but what you have is a research update. And it's a very rich source of information. There's a lot of detail in there about who's caring, who's being cared for, what relationships that exist primarily between carers and the people they care for, some of the differences between people who live with the people they care for, who live separately from the people they care for. So there's a very useful source of information there. I'm not going to go through every piece of information, every statistic in that. It would probably send you to sleep if I did, quite honestly, but it is something that will bear further study and analysis, and as Paula said, even more exciting for some of the policy wonks there may be in the audience is that it's possible to go to the data and interrogate the data on the website. So I hope that you'll be able to use the information very detailed. But what I've done is I've pulled out the bits that jumped out at me the first time I read the research. The first thing to say is that a quarter of the respondents, 26%, had caring responsibilities. And that's the same level as was found in 1994 and actually slightly higher than in 2006. In 2006, it was about 23%. So we're back up to the 1994 levels. And I suppose in some ways this is, the interest of this finding for me is that there were assumptions starting to be made about how social change was affecting our families and our communities. There's been a lot of talk about increasing geographical mobility, the increasing numbers of women in paid work and therefore perhaps not as available to provide unpaid care within the family context. Changes in family structure with more divorces, more second marriages, second families and the complicated living arrangements that many more of us seem to be in these days. And also concerns about community structure. Cameron's claims about broken Britain and a concern, well, what does that mean for Northern Ireland? Is that playing out in Northern Ireland? And one of the things that's come through loud and clear is that those changes may well be happening, but they haven't undermined people's commitment to caring for those in their family, not just their immediate family circle, but also their wider family circle when time comes that they need help and support to remain independent. So it's not in some ways the most exciting finding in the world to report that there's no change, but actually it is hugely significant to know that we're still in a position where probably the vast majority of care in the community care, or care in the community, is still being provided unpaid by family members. In terms of who's doing the caring, again, you'll find the tables about who's caring for in-laws, who's caring for older people, for younger people. The one point I would pick out really is that as we expected, because of the overall change in demographics and the largely, or the very significant increase in the older population, the proportion of older people in the population, we are seeing a slightly ageing profile amongst carers, but it's not a hugely significant shift yet. Most carers are still in their middle years, therefore most carers are still of working age and have aspirations to remain in work and to be in work, as well as having caring responsibilities. So the numbers of older carers are increasing, but it's a slow and steady increase at this stage, and there's been no dramatic shift, certainly since 2006, when the last figures were published. The next thing then that jumped out at me, not just the numbers of people caring, quarter of the adult population, but the amount of time that people are devoting to their caring responsibilities. 30% of carers, nearly a third of carers, spend 30 hours or more a week caring. That's quite a commitment, almost a full-time job. 18% of carers are spending 60 hours a week or more caring. Most of those are actually living with the people that they care for, and I suppose that makes sense if you think about it. If you live with someone and care for them, you are on call constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for most people, so it's no surprise. But you can tell from that there's a huge amount of unpaid caring work going on, a huge amount of labour being put in all across Northern Ireland. This is about the same as 2006. And the reason, that it's important to know this is because we know from research elsewhere that once someone starts caring for over 20 hours a week, that's when the significant impacts on their own health, their own well-being, their own financial situation start to kick in. So we've got large numbers of people in Northern Ireland still who are caring at a level where if they don't get proper supports in place, they're in danger of damaging their own health and well-being because of their caring responsibilities. And you'll see when we go a little bit later on to talk about the health impact, we can see that there appears to be an adverse impact on carers' health from caring. I also want to separate out another statistic that you'll find in the report, which is that 27% of carers report having a disability or long-standing illness, compared to 21% of the people who are not carers in this survey. So significantly more carers will report disability or long-standing illness themselves. Now, some of the long-standing illness may be related to the health impacts of the caring role, but there's also another issue, which is that there are a lot of people who are themselves living with disabilities and conditions that may cause restrictions in their everyday lives, who are also caring for other people. I think there is a notion, going back to the original slide, about care in the community and what's care in the community. I think there was maybe a fallacy abounding when care in the community and community care policies first came in, that it's about the young and fit looking after the old and infirm. And what this research shows very clearly is the picture is a lot more complex than that. And there is a lot more mutual support and interdependence there within families that we need to be taking account of when we're approaching families to try and offer them support. We need not to assume that the carer has no additional needs themselves. And I've learnt from one of my colleagues who's here in the audience of the various supports that have been developed. There are special alarms, for example, for carers who have hearing impairments, so that if someone needs you in the middle of the night, you can have a vibrating alarm under your pillow and you can get up and respond to the person that you care for. So, some of the private sector companies are developing a lot of sophistication, and we want to see more of that, and I think we will see much more technological solutions being developed to support carers over the next few years. Okay. Moving on then, one of the new questions that was asked this time around when looking at the number of hours caring was to check how many people were caring above 35 hours a week. That hadn't been a figure that was usually looked at. It was around 20 hours, 30 hours, 50 hours tended to be the thresholds. The 35-hour a week threshold is significant because that's the number of hours caring you have to be undertaking to be eligible for the carers allowance, which is the main carers benefit. So that it is going to be very useful in terms of social policy terms, and I think it's going to be particularly useful for our Department of Social Development and the Social Security Agency in starting to look at how well they're doing in reaching out to people who are carers, letting them know about benefits and encouraging uptake. Now, obviously, like everything else, it's not a simple equation because there are very many other eligibility criteria around benefits, and not every carer who cares for 35 hours a week will be eligible. But it gives you some very useful comparative information that you can start to check benefit uptake against. So probably that's not so exciting for anybody else, but for carers who depend on carers allowance, if they are forced into a position where they have to give up work, it's quite a significant benchmark to have. The next thing that jumped out at me absolutely is that really we talk about care in the community, but caring is by and large a family affair. And other more qualitative work shows that it's not just a family affair, but it's very often care by one member of the family who's left to get on with it by everybody else. But only 6% of the people in the survey who reported caring responsibilities are caring for someone who isn't a family member. So I think, again, in terms of targeting support, we need to look at how families are working together to support individuals, and how families are supporting not just the person with a disability, but supporting the carer in order to care. And anyone in this audience who is or has been a carer themselves, I'm sure will have close personal experience of the difficulties there can sometimes be in negotiating within families. And perhaps one of the more useful roles that social workers can take on in a time when they're less likely perhaps to have services to offer is to be talking to and working with individuals who are caring to look at what other coping resources or potential coping supports they have, and to think a little bit about how to negotiate and unlock the potential support that may be there but can be very difficult to call on. The other little thing that I draw attention to there is that both men and women provide care for a wide range of family members. I think, the thought often is, and certainly I've seen it in other places before, that men who are caring are mainly caring for spouses and partners, as if when you stand up and make a vow at a wedding ceremony, you're actually entering into a contract and you take that seriously and you live up to it and fulfil it, whereas maybe there isn't the same expectation or same obligation to provide care across the wider range of family relationships. This research shows that men are caring across the full range of family relationships. So I think there's a lot of men out there putting in a lot of hours caring who are invisible, both to public services that might be able to support them and possibly even within their own families. So that's something that I think is worth drawing attention to. The next thing I mentioned, the impact of caring on health and emotional well-being and financial position of carers. And again, you'll see it when you look at it in more detail, but certainly we've got 1 in 5 carers feeling under pressure most of the time. Another 40% on top of that who are feeling under pressure sometimes. We've got only 64% of carers saying their health is excellent or good, compared to 72% of those who are not in a caring role. So carers more likely to report ill health. And equally, carers are more likely than non-carers to say that their income has fallen behind prices. Because of course, if you're caring for someone and you're starting to struggle financially, you can't just go and take on extra hours of work, take on an extra part-time job, because you're committed to the caring role and you don't have that additional time, so you have little flexibility to bring in more income. The other thing is that we can see the situation is getting worse. Some of the comparative data allows us to see that even more people, both non-carers and carers, are under financial pressure now than were in the last time the question was asked. But the distinction remains that carers are still more likely to be struggling financially than people who don't have a caring role. Coming towards the end, The other thing that I really liked about this piece of research is that, as well as trying to identify the difficulties and the strains that caring brings, we also wanted to look at some of the satisfactions that come with the caring role. And the research gives us a sense of what people see as the satisfactions of caring. So we've got 3/4 of people who are happy that they're able to help someone for most of the time. People feel they're helping someone, it's important to them, and they get satisfaction from that. Only 6% of people don't feel that they're helping someone most of the time. And 6 out of 10 feel that they're giving something back. Another nearly 30% feel that sometimes, as well as the nearly 60% who feel it all of the time. So it paints a picture of caring that's not just a kind of a duty. It's not just a social obligation. It's not something people feel they have to do and resent and feel angry about. It's something people undertake willingly. But that doesn't mean that it should be something that causes damage to their own health and well-being. And that's why when we were talking with Paula about the title for the presentation, the title for the research update, what I suggested was An Ordinary Life. People are falling into caring out all the time. Caring is coming to an end. Huge numbers of people are involved. We should be able to move in and out of caring without damaging our own life, without damaging our prospects. It is part of ordinary life for so many of us. And the public policies that are there to support people should support it in that way, that it's just something that happens, like becoming a parent, like having an accident, like being born, like dying. It's something that happens as part of life. We should accept it as a normal part of life and make sure people can do it without, as I say, damaging their own lives and their own prospects. So the summary really isn't so much a summary of the research as it's me pulling out the bits that I think are really, really interesting, and I've covered it all really. There are large numbers of people in Northern Ireland providing many hours of support. Many of us will provide care to another family member at some point in our lives, and some people will do it for a very long time. Children with disabilities who would have had no chance of a life expectancy maybe 20 years ago are now living long lives supported by their family members. People are caring for 50 and 60 years into
Sorry. Thank you very much, Helen. I say this is research that's based on the lives of 1,205 people. As Helen said, it's about an ordinary life. But it's nice to have lots of numbers, and as researchers we tend to get bogged down in the research, in the numbers. But we're very happy that Laura has agreed to come and talk to us today about actually telling us about the life of a carer. So it's not just lots of numbers today. We do have, somebody's life and telling us about caring within a changing world. So thank you very much.
When Helen asked me a month ago what I do, I usually say yes without thinking through the consequences. What's it about? It's about the life and times. And I thought, what do you do, as we all do? If you're asked to do something, what do? You go off to Google, okay? So I went and Googled life and times, and I got Benjamin Franklin, the inventor of electricity, somebody involved in abolishing the slave trade. Then I got Nelson Mandela. So I'm starting to feel very small at this point. What am I meant to be saying? As I scanned down the page, I saw Cheryl Cole. So I felt an awful lot better at this point. I'm older than her, and I haven't been an X Factor. But people have told me that I should write a book about my life as a carer. And I tell them that even the producers of EastEnders wouldn't accept it, because it couldn't really have happened. I certainly have not had an ordinary life, and I hope to share some of the highlights in the very short time I have today. And I will be giving you some numbers, because I thought there would be research people here, because I love research just as much as you, within all of that, and the role of the carer in this very fast changing world. So I want you to think back to the summer of 1981, and where were you? And for me that was a very, very special time, because it was my son David was born. And also it was a very special time as well, because a very important carer charity was formed that summer too. My son David is 30 next month, so I've organised a chef to come to our house to cook him his food, because food's big to David. So a really big celebration. And it's 30 years I have to condense for you in 15 minutes. So it's a hard ask, Helen. And later on, I'm going to spend some time on the personal aspect of being in care. But I want to look at really three parts: the past, the present, and the future. What's happened over the past 30 years in regard to health and illness and the impact on the caring role. Ovarian cancer detection rate has increased from 21% to 41%. Smoking has reduced from 40% to 25%. Deaths amongst children because of assault have fallen from an average of 3 a week in 1974 to 1 a week in 2008. So we have better child protection policies have been developed and implemented during that period. But on the other side, far more people live alone, are single, and are more fearful of their communities than they were 3 decades ago. And that was from the National Census stats, so that's come from. BMJ has a study in Glasgow which says the number of people claiming incapacity benefit and severe disablement allowance in the UK has increased over 300% in the last 30 years at an annual cost to the economy of around 100 billion. So there's issues around the dependency culture and how the government is going to be addressing that and the benefit cuts that are looming. GP visits have gone from 22% down to 5%. And the interesting thing, the reason was phone ownership. It's a very interesting one because we think we've always had phones, but we haven't. So you had to go out and see people. The rate of men dying from the deadliest form of skin cancer has doubled over the past 3 decades. The wife didn't remind you to put the sunscreen on, so you didn't do it. So it's interesting about taking responsibility for your own health. And the percentage of people aged between 45 and 74 who were obese has actually increased by 10% in the period of 1995 to 2007. So only in 12 years have we had an increase of 10% in obesity. So as the size of the family has reduced and more women are in the workforce, there are fewer folk available to care, resulting in an increasing workload for a limited number of people. We've experienced globalization, home ownership growth following the Thatcher years, increasing personal debt, and a worldwide economic downturn. For most folk in the West, the biggest change over the past 30 years, I would say, must be the digital revolution. I remember 18 years ago, having the internet, we were early adopters because my husband was a programmer. We had to pay by the second. And my daughter was away to somebody in Belgium for a month, and it was horrendous, the bill that came back. But things have really moved on from that, and technology has invaded every aspect of our lives, and even the carers world. And Carers UK has a carers online forum that connects carers who are at home and isolated, and I want to share you one quote from that, from a lady who's joined the forum. "I was staring at the ceiling in despair, and now I have fallen among friends. Even though we may not have met or even spoken, you'll probably know more about me than many of the people I've known for years." So that's the power of technology for carers. We have a current generation who can tap the app in this age of instant gratification. If only there was an app to speak to the pharmacist, to book the OT appointment, to do the ironing. We'd all have one of those. So telemedicine is here, but it's really still in its infancy, and I would certainly like that to be advanced more for family carers. So I've had a wee quick look at health and society, but on the personal end, for me, a very quick whistle-stop tour. My son was born in 1981 and David has autism. My husband in 1982 developed mental health problems that she's had from then till now. My father had heart problems, started in 1983, and he died 7 years later of cancer. And then from 1989, caring for my mother who was elderly frail. In 1997, my husband had ECT for severe depression, and he had an acquired brain injury following that. And in 1999, my mother went into residential care for her dementia and Parkinson's, and she died 3 years later. So it's been a long period of caring. And in 2000, I had my first care session, I think probably one of the first in Northern Ireland. And then 2004, new caring had started for my daughter in England and looking after her health problems. And in 2006, I moved from domiciliary care to direct payments, and it's made such a change to my life. So I've always had my son to care for, and sometimes caring for 3 people. So I've spent most of my adult life caring for my family and fighting for them to get the services they require. I've been an activist for both carers and disabled people, sat on many committees at various levels, local, regional, national. I've no time today to go into any detail. But my caring has not happened in a vacuum. Lots of changes were going on at national level, which I was not even aware of. I didn't know I was a carer for 10 years. I just thought I was a parent with a handicapped child. And when you go and you look and you type the word, because you know Google is the font of all knowledge, and you type anything in and it'll get you back. When you kept typing the word carer and you kept going, do you mean career? And I go, no, I mean carer. And if you go, or I'll give you it as a test, you go and try and find anything before 1981 on carers on the web, and you'll see there's nothing there. It just shows you how new caring is. As I alluded to earlier, 2 births, my son, and the birth of a new organisation. So the 20th of June 1981 was the formal launch of Carers National Association by a lady called Judith Oliver. And it was a member-led ethos, which was very radical at the time, that carers were at the heart and would drive forward the issues that they felt were important. And it wasn't just about caring for elderly relatives. It was the start of what we now know as the sandwich generation, where you were caring perhaps for your parents and also for your children and maybe for a husband. Very different field to what people had perceived carers to be. And they started with a very, very grand sum of money, £9,879 from the Equal Opportunities Commission. So thank you to the Equal Opportunities Commission for taking that risk. Early campaigns were Jackie Drake, and I remember sitting, my son was 5, this was going on in Europe, to get invalid care allowance extended to my men and women. I remember sitting waiting for that because I didn't have that benefit yet. So it's amazing as you look back how things have changed and things have come online. And this charity that was developing, Carers National Association, actually couldn't get charitable status for 2 years because carers were not deemed worthy of support. They were just doing what's expected of you, caring for a relative. So things have certainly changed on that front. So by 86, 2 organisations merged to become CNA, and then in the 90s, Jill Keithley was very influential at Westminster in moving forward the whole care debate and developing of the organisation. In 97 was the first national helpline for carers, and I was quite astounded reading that. It's only 14 years, if I can do. Am I doing my maths right there? Yes? Yes. It's not that long. And Carers National Association rebranded into Carers UK in 2001. So many achievements. I've just picked a few. Carers assessment, the right to request flexible working, employer support, benefit campaigns, generation of hundreds of millions of pounds year on year since 2001 in carers grants. So significant impact that Carers UK has had. And we now have the term family care firmly embedded in our consciousness, even though sometimes people slightly misuse it. We even have parent carers, mutual carers, young carers. So we've moved away from the stereotype of the housebound single daughter being the martyr for her family, and thankfully we've moved from that. So now the present. So we've had today's data, which is great to have that. 6 million carers, which has been pretty steady for the past decade or so, but the new actuarial figures, 119 billion. The NHS and a bit more. So it is significant what carers deliver. And it's sad that 75% do have ill health, and 75% of those actually have mental health problems. And half of those live with the person they care for, spend 60 hours per week. So it's a job and a half. And that's coming out in this research. But who actually recognise it? So we have the data to prove what we have known from personal experience. We have the data to start to lever services. And Carers UK is built on very firm founding principles that have stood the test of time. Evidence-based campaigning, and this is what a lot of today is about, and using that evidence, putting family carers at the heart of the work, the use of the media, which I know they were doing earlier this morning, and astute political lobbying. And I would now like to look at that. Where are we today in the politics in Northern Ireland? What are the newly elected Assembly saying about carers? And recently there was a debate on the special needs services for children as they finish their very structured school education. What happens after that? So Basil McRae, who's the chair of the DEL committee, said this is an issue in that we have to look at respite services. They are not a luxury. And they're not an add-on. Frankly, they're absolutely essential. Mark Durkin, he then said, as services are cut in some places and non-existent in others, many families are at breaking point. They are physically and mentally exhausted. The pressure on carers, who are often parents, increases as their children grow up. The role becomes more physically demanding as carers grow older. Parents increasingly aware of their own mortality, fear for how their son or daughter will cope after they have gone. This is compounded by the withdrawal of statutory support when school leaving age is reached. And our new Health Minister, Mr Poots. Carers have a right to a life outside caring. Respite gives them the opportunity to have a break from their caring duties. All carers are individuals with their own needs. They care for people with a huge range of needs in what can be very complex and emotionally charged relationships. One solution will not fit all. Carers need real choices based on their individual circumstances. So I'm very pleased to hear all of those comments, and obviously they have been listening to Helen. She's been at them for 20 years, and sometimes you feel they don't, but it's very clear there they have really got their head around what caring is about. And I know that the politicians did say that when they were out electioneering, that they were actually knocking on a lot of doors, and they were hearing from that hidden silent army whose voice they hadn't heard. And it's very clear that they do understand, but will they allocate the level of funding that is needed? And Margaret Ridgely, she recently said, carers save the Treasury billions of pounds each year. They need and deserve greater support than they currently receive, and it is the responsibility of the government to provide it. I hope she and other politicians I've just quoted will keep the carer profile high and with those who hold the purse strings. And it is an issue that resources are not always ring-fenced for carers. They somehow get lost in the system, and we need to start tracking our money if we are to promote personalisation and deliver on individual budgets. And it was interesting that the Health Committee have stated that they hope to put, and I would like to encourage them that they will, put care of the elderly, domiciliary care packages and respite facilities for carers in their forward plan. We need to ensure that they do that. So I've looked at the past and the present, and we'll now look to the future. Will our health be better, or will it be worse? What do we think will happen in the next 30 years? What's research tell us? If we project ahead, if we try to scan the horizon, what do we think will be happening? And as Helen has mentioned earlier about the care demographics are changing, we're going to live longer but with poorer health. We're going to have the older old. We're going to have more dementia. We currently have 207,000 family carers in Northern Ireland, and the number will need to double to meet the level of demand in 30 years. 11 million of those alive today are expected to reach 100 years of age. And thus, because of increasing technology, the number over 50 with learning disability will rise by 53% by 2021. And the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development has estimated that the cost of caring for the elderly could treble by 2050. Not only are we seeing more older people needing care, the age of their carers is getting older too. And as Helen said earlier, looking back to the 2001 census, that if you break down the numbers, 35% were under 44, 40% were in the 45 to 65, the big caring group, and the 25% were the over 65s. We're now starting to see that moving forward into that older age group. So how is that actually going to impact on older carers? And there's been some American research done called caregiving as a risk factor for mortality. And I quote, "The combination of loss, prolonged distress, the physical demands of caregiving, and biological vulnerabilities of older caregivers may compromise their physiological functioning and increase their risk for physical health problems, leading to increased mortality, Participants who were providing care and experiencing caregiver strain had mortality risks that were 63% higher than non-caregiving controls. So caring can be a really tough call for those who are of pension age and older. So what support will be available? Who will be funding health care and social care? The comprehensive spending review of the 2010 coalition government has generated the largest substantial fall in public expenditure since 1922. The NHS needs an extra 1% a year just to stand still. It's pretty scary stuff. And looking ahead at the issues around long-term care, the Dillnut Commission will be reporting in a few weeks' time on this funding. It's likely to suggest increased funding by the state and by the individual. No free personal care, new national assessment of eligibility, a care savings scheme has been mooted, with attendance allowance thankfully to be retained. And Andrew Dillnut was here in Northern Ireland in February, and he met a lot of stakeholders. And in Northern Ireland there certainly did seem to be resistance to change, to moving forward. There certainly was resistance to charging. Personalisation, for lots of different reasons, is slow to move forward. They saw there's a need for preventative work, cross-generational consensus, and that we have, thankfully, a very good voluntary sector to build upon. So the government needs to bring forward proposals for a fair and sustainable funding agreement for social care, and to ensure that carers have the support they need to prevent ill health and isolation. And indeed, in the report, The Future of Care Funding 2008, they state, any settlement will fail if it neglects carers' needs. And Andrew Gurria, the OECD Secretary General, has also said on this issue, with costs rising fast, countries must get better value for money from their spending on long-term care. The piecemeal policies in place in many countries must be overhauled in order to boost productivity and support family carers who are the backbone of long-term care systems. So in conclusion, the statistics suggest that we'll be living longer with poorer health, with limited income, in a disconnected society. Historical knowledge and experience inform future policy direction, which is often conservative in nature. Personalisation may never take up with this type of perspective. How can we create an alternative future vision of a pathway for sustainability? How can we pay it forward? And in doing so, design the future, rather than making ongoing adaptations which deliver minimal impact. We've been ignored, we've been isolated, we're now included as carers, and I know personally I'm involved in co-production and commissioning, and that's a wonderful place to be after 30 years. Looking ahead for the carer, better benchmarking of trust performance in supporting carers through their internal self-audit, strategic involvement in strategy groups within the trust or within the new regional care strategy group. We need to encourage and support a wide range of partnerships to hear different perspectives, to encourage that dialogue, and through that we can create new, flexible, responsive services at the point of engagement with the system. And looking ahead for everyone. We know obesity is increasing. We have what's called the obesogenic generation. It's a new term I learned this week. And in a report entitled Making Chronic Conditions Count, it says that there are more chronic conditions occurring in disadvantaged areas. So I think we need to look broader, to look at the issues of social determinants of health. How can we promote community development to reduce the growing health inequalities? And the World Health Organization, and this is a statistic I just find startling, has said 80% of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes and 40% of cancer could be avoided. But we only put 3% of our budget into health promotion, and this is from research on the island of Ireland, of the amount of money we put in. So the challenge for us is that we have just a reactive spend by our trusts, but early intervention pays off in the long term. We need to start today for the decade ahead. If we fail to plan, we plan to fail. When limited resources are targeted wisely, we can extend the years of health and well-being for our loved ones, and at the same time reduce the number of years of the care burden. allowing more chance to have a life more ordinary. And for many carers, that's all that they ask. Thank you.
Do I need any? Okay, thank you very much, Laura, for that. And what we want to do in this part of the seminar is just look at some of the results from some of the other survey work that ARC has undertaken, as well as the Life and Time survey, as Anne-Marie talked about earlier. We also undertake the Young Life and Time survey, which is a survey of 16-year-olds, and also the Kids Life and Time survey, which is a survey of primary 7 children who are aged 10 or 11. And again, as Laura said, there isn't a stereotype of what a carer is anymore. So what we really want to focus on in this section is looking at young carers using the data that we have from our 2 most recent surveys. And we made a deliberate plan in 2010 that when we were going to include a module of questions on caring within the Life and Time survey, that obviously we needed to replicate this in the other surveys just to get a picture right across the full spectrum of people who are actually providing care in our society. So just a quick background to the Young Life and Time survey. This is data from the 2010. Young Life and Times is a survey of 16-year-olds living in Northern Ireland. It can be completed by post, it can be completed online, or it can be completed by phone. Every year we ask all 16-year-olds who had their birthday in February or March of that year to take part. 2010, 786 took part. That was a response rate of about 21%. I say it is mostly a postal survey. So we had questions on caring responsibilities. We have had asked this question previously in other surveys, but what we did was run a complete module, so we were asking quite a lot of different questions, more so than we had done previously. And we found that about 1 in 10 of these 16-year-olds said that they did have caring responsibilities. We asked them, do they currently have them now, or have they had them in the past but not now? So 10% said that they currently had them now, and a further 9% that said, well, no, they didn't have caring responsibilities now, but they had done in the past. So overall, then 1 in 5 young people aged 16 have had caring responsibilities at some time. And it's similar proportions of males and females. You can see that looking at the moment, it's 8% of the males within the Young Life and Time survey said they're caring responsibilities now. 11% of females, but this was reversed in terms of previous caring roles. So this, out of our 786 respondents, we're going to look now at some of the information relating to the responsibilities of about 70 odd young people. So as Helen alluded to earlier, it's very much seems to be the case of young people caring for other members of the family. So about a third of respondents said that they cared for their grandmother. 30% said that they were providing care for the mother. Now, of course, what's important here is respondents could identify more than one person. As we've already heard today, people aren't always providing care for just one person. So, for example, we had respondents within Young Life and Times who were providing care for both their parents or providing care for both their grandparents. So we can see about 1 in 5 were providing care for their brother, and then 18% were providing care for somebody else. So that was another elderly relative. Another young person was providing care for their child who had spina bifida. Somebody else was providing care for a neighbour. So, but it is mostly for other members of the family. But again, it is important to realise that how wide-ranging these caring responsibilities are. So looking at the extent of caring, I'm not going to go into too much detail here. Again, you've got the research update that this comes from in your packs as well, so you'll be able to look at that. And also, as with the Life and Time survey, all the data, the questionnaires, tables of results from the Young Life and Time survey are available on the Young Life and Times survey website as well. But we've found that about 1/3 said that they provided care 1 or 2 days per week. But on the other hand, we found that just over 1/2 provided care 5 or more days per week, presumably because for a lot of these young people, they are living in the house with the person they provide care for. About 6 out of 10 are providing care for 10 hours a week or less. But on the other hand, 10% are providing care for 30 hours a week or more. So that's more or less a full-time job. But think of this within the context that the vast majority of these young people are 16-year-old and they're also going to school or they're going to college full-time as well. So it's not just that they're doing this in isolation and this is their only role. 10% provided care for less than 6 months. So it was something that had happened quite recently, as Helen alluded to at the start of her presentation, how things can change. But we found that 21% have done this for at least 5 years or more, and these are 16-year-olds that we're talking about, so they've been providing care for a long time. Then we looked at the type of tasks and activities that they undertake, and again, it's not just that people do just one thing. We found that most young people were providing care in at least about 5 of the tasks that we show here. So we can see that about 2/3 of respondents said that, they'd watch over the person that they're providing care for. About just under half were cleaning. A slightly lower proportion were cooking as well. But you can see there's also a lot of other more personal tasks, such as washing, dressing, taking someone to and from the toilet as well, that are undertaken. There are a few differences by gender there that we could see, and that males were less likely to undertake some of the more personal tasks for the person that they're providing care for. As with Life and Times as well, though, we weren't interested in just the numbers in terms of the extent and the tasks and whatever. And for the first time, we asked some questions about the feelings of the young carers, both positive and negative, because as Helen said, it's not just a negative thing. We hear a lot about stress and resentment, or just the whole pressure of caring. But as we saw with Life and Times, there's also positive feelings about this as well. And it is important to emphasise these. And I think some of the results here very much show this. So we found that 71% of the young carers agreed or strongly agreed that they enjoyed caring. 80% said that they'd never missed school because of their caring role. And that is quite remarkable, given how much time some of these young people are spending. And we found about 2/3 said that they don't mind other people knowing that they're a young carer. And in fact, 60% of the young carers said that they had told somebody else about this, often their friends. But that does mean that 40% hadn't told anybody about this at all. But we found that about 2/3 said that caring doesn't stop me going out and do things with their friends. So again, so these are quite positive things that I think the enjoyment of caring is an important statistic there, and also that it's not missing school and being able to doesn't stop them going out and doing things with their friends. However, there's a more mixed pattern when we look at some of the other responses. We look at, I worry all the time about the person that I care for when I'm not with them, and we found that responses were more spread across there. So 39% agreed or strongly agreed with that, whereas an almost similar proportion neither agreed nor disagreed, and the same proportion disagreed or strongly disagreed with that statement. And then when we look at feeling guilty about going out, socialising and leaving the person that I care for, then we find that, okay, 39% disagree with that, but 1 in 5 said, well, actually, yes, I do agree or strongly agree with that statement. And I think that's, so you could think, well, yes, we saw that young people said that they're still going out and socialising with their friends, but perhaps they're there in body, but for some of them, they're still fulfilling their caring role and thinking about and worrying about the person at home. And then we also asked a few questions about being involved in decisions, because these are young carers who obviously are undertaking a very important role. But as with a lot of the issues that involve 16-year-olds in our society, they're at a very strange age in that, they can care for somebody, they can work, they can't drive, they can't vote. So a lot of, they're in that cusp of being able to do some things and not others. And we found that about 1/3 agreed or strongly agreed that they felt that they were fully involved in decisions that were made of the care about the person. So I think that's quite an interesting statistic as well. We also asked another question, which we haven't reported here, which is about, are you aware, or I know that the social services can help provide me with support for the person that I'm providing care for, and about half of respondents agreed with that. But we actually found that a quarter of respondents didn't know how to answer that question, and I think that's actually interesting in itself, in that perhaps they didn't know what help was available for them. We also found that people had received support from other sources, often other family members. So, but contact with other organisations was perhaps quite low. So I think it's a whole mixture of issues that need to be looked into account, especially as these are 16-year-olds. So just a few final thoughts. We've seen here a snapshot of young carers. If you want to find more information, as I say, look at the website, look at the research update. As we've heard very eloquently from both Laura and Helen today, as with adults, young carers are providing care that would otherwise need to be provided by other agencies, and of course need to be paid for by tax revenue. And as Laura said, you know, the spending review has just made a huge cut in the amount of money that is available for these services. So it is something that our politicians need to think about. There are some sources of help out there, but these mostly have been family-based, and there's been little contact with external organisations. Whether that's because they don't know about external organisations, or they don't feel they need help, or perhaps because they don't want to talk to other people about their caring role. But what exactly are the longer-term consequences? As I say, these are 16-year-olds, most of which are at school or at college. When we asked them what they feel they would like to be doing in 2 years' time, the majority of them said that they would like to be at university or college full-time. So the question is basically, who cares if the young carers want to leave home? What are the implications for families of perhaps somebody who's providing 50, 60 hours of care per week if they want to leave home, and perhaps they feel that, you know, implications then for the young person feeling that perhaps the choices that other people have aren't necessarily available for them. Thank you. And now I'd like to hand over to Katrina.
Okay, so far we've heard about caring among adults and among 16-year-olds, and now in this part of the presentation I'm going to talk to you about assessing caring among T7 children, younger children. And actually what I want to talk about as well, present some of the findings and talk to you a little bit about some of the issues that are involved in trying to measure caring among 10 and 11-year-old children. First of all, I want to tell you a little bit about the survey. It's the Kids' Life and Times, which is the third of ARC's and the newest of ARC's surveys, and it's a survey of P7 children in Northern Ireland. So it began in 2008, so we're now in our 4th year. It's innovative in a number of ways. It's innovative in that it's carried out online in school. It's the first large-scale survey in Northern Ireland to be carried out in this way. Because it's online, it meant that we were able to make the survey animated, have music, have voices of actors reading out the questions, things that would help make it interesting and fun for the children to take part. It's also innovative in another way in that it invites all P7 age children who are in Northern Ireland to take part, and that's children in mainstream, special hospital schools, and children who are taught at home. When we get the Education and Library Board's permission, we actually invite children who are taught at home. So we try to make this survey as inclusive as possible. The questions on caring were asked in 2011, and the field work took place in March and April of this year. Now, before I present any of the findings, what I want to do is to give you, show you a very, very short video clip of some of the questions from Kids' Life and Times. And that's so you can get an idea of the context in which the caring questions were actually asked. Now, there's no sound in this one, so you won't hear the actors' voices or the music, but you will see what the children experienced and the context in which they were asked. So hopefully it will work. Yes. So these are the little characters that we have from Banging the Door that we use, and the characters welcome the children to the survey. These questions were from 2010, but they're asked again in 2011. The children have to give their school number. They don't give any other identifying information, but we need the school number. So this character comes on, tells them all about the survey, and then eventually says, do you want to take part? If they say no, they're logged out. If they say yes, then they continue through the survey. And as I said, the actors' voices read out all of the questions. So I want to show you the variety of question formats that we use to try and keep the children's interest. So there's lots of boxes and things, and numbers to tick on, and the children can skip any question that they don't want to do, and they can go back if they want to. Sometimes they can give one answer and sometimes they can give more than one answer. Your little character here is a boy if you were a boy in the beginning, and a girl if you were a girl when you started, when you said that that's what your gender was. So there's a variety. These little smiley faces are very good for measuring attitudes in children of this age. And this is part of a health and well-being scale, and then some questions on bullying that we asked. So it's just to give you a flavour of what the children were experiencing when they were filling in these questions on caring. In terms of the response rate, this is slightly down than last year, with 32% of schools and 19% of children. Now that means we have a marvellous big database of 4,192 children, which is brilliant, but it's quite a low response rate, so we have to look and see, is there any bias in, particularly looking at the schools, and is there bias in the schools that are taking part and the schools that are not. And what we found over the 4 years is there's a fairly good spread. We have figures from Denny that give you some idea around school size and free school meals and school type. And we haven't been too bad, actually. We're not too concerned about bias there. We do have some bias in that more girls take part than boys. Denny figures for 2010-11 suggest 48% of P7s are girls, and we got 53%. And we do find that in Young Life and Times and the Adult Life and Times, that girls and women are more likely to fill in surveys than men and boys, and it starts at a younger age. In terms of the caring, we did want to keep the questions similar as possible to Young Life and Times. So what we asked was, some children your age have to help look after someone who's sick, elderly, disabled. Do you do that? So that's someone living with you, someone who's not living with you. And then in both those contexts, we asked, who is it that you look after? And then we had an open-ended question on what kinds of things do you help them with. So our P7s say, 11% of them say they give special help to someone living with them, and 33% say they give help to someone not living with them. Those are higher than for Young Life and Times. And I think, particularly looking at the 33%, you start to get a feel for the fact that these children are maybe thinking about caring in a much broader way than we are as researchers, in a narrower sense of actually caring for someone. But of course we do ask them, do you give special help to? So a 10, 11-year-old's perspective is different to maybe a 16-year-old. We ask who you care for, and interesting, like Young Life and Times, P7s were most likely to say they look after the grandmother in both those situations. Again, they could identify more than one person, and that became difficult when I was looking at the open-ended questions, because if a child says they look after their brother, mother, sister, father, some children gave 4, and then they say they do the washing or they do the dishes, is that caring or is that helping? So it was quite difficult to work out, because 45% of the children said they cared for one person and the rest said they cared for more than one person. So what I've done is, I'm going to show you some quotes from the children themselves, and what I've done is I've selected children who have said that they help adults in their lives, so their mum or their dad or their grandparents, and you can get a flavour of some of the things these children are doing. So this one is children who said they care for their mum. So when we're out, I have to make sure that I have her hand so that she doesn't get unstable and fall over. And in the house she has to help when she gets tired, shopping, hoovering, dishes, chores, help her get up. I would help my mummy with work around the house, help her when she's walking when her back is sore. For some of the things they do for their dad, going up and down the stairs, get things for him. When he's in hospital, I visit him and help mum bring him the things he needs. Just day-to-day things, but it can get tough and stressful. When he falls, I help him up. Dressing, going to the loo. Cooking, gardening, washing, food and drink. So you can see a child that's helping an adult, their father, do these kind of things is, within anybody's sense, is caring. The grandparents, lifting heavy things up and down the stairs. I do most of the cleaning for them. Well, my nanny's disabled, so I help her get her clothes and help her eat her food. Cook, clean, bath them. Remember, these are P7 children and these are their grandparents. Dinner, drinks, getting out of bed, emptying nanny's bag. I can't tell what for. So that's an indication again of a child that's caring. Now those are quite clear, and I deliberately chose those because they are quite clear that I think from those quotes that some of these P7 children are giving an extent of caring that, for their young age is remarkable. But it wasn't as straightforward as that all the way through, because you had the 33% particularly who said they helped look after someone outside the home, and they give a whole lot of quotes. Now, this child was one who helped look after the grandfather. So I help him make his breakfast with my mum and cheer him up, which is wonderful in itself. Then you had cases where the children were saying they help a lot of people, and they were doing something like shopping, cutting the grass, or washing the dishes. And it became difficult to sort of know at some points whether they were actually children who were seeing this in a much broader sense than perhaps I was, or my expectation was as a researcher who's coming to this. So just to finish up, a couple of issues, I think. I don't think, even though we've got figures for 11, we were very wary about putting this out in the press, because the figure of 11% and 33% for P7 children caring is just thinking, well, can we stand over it? And in some ways we can't, because the children are obviously perceiving this slightly differently than we are. So we didn't put it out in the press. We kept it for here. The data are available for people to use, but you need to bear some things in mind. Maybe it is a survey, and we weren't actually there to probe more deeply with the children and ask them these kind of questions. But I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think the survey data are very useful, very interesting, and definitely something that we should include again in Kids' Life and Times. It just is more difficult to word the questions in a way that we as adults can put across what it is we're looking for, and that the children actually understand. I think for this age group, one of the things that would be good to do maybe is to work with some P7 carers or young children who are carers, and develop the questions in conjunction with them. So there's been some work done at Queen's here on working with children and designing questions, and they're very, very useful, and I think it's maybe something that we would like to take forward in Kids' Life and Times in the future, because I think we definitely do need to ask these questions. Or we could follow the model that NILT and YILT have used in the past, which is follow up some children from the survey and interview them more in depth, or have focus groups to delve more deeply into this important issue. As Paul said, we don't know the long-term consequences of caring, and we certainly don't know the long-term consequences for these children of caring. So in true researcher tradition, I'm just going to finish by saying we really do need more